Okay. So we are at, we call them episodes, episode 3 of Mental Health Minis. So welcome back, Heather. Thank you again for doing this with me and lending us your professional expertise.
No problem.
So we are talking today about our inner child, and specifically with the holidays. We just passed Thanksgiving and we're coming up on even more of the holiday season. And I know that for both of us, it was very easy for us to pick a topic for this week for Mental Health Monday. Because so much of that comes out when even if we're not physically seeing our families, just around like holiday traditions and around just even coming in contact with your family. And specifically for me, my parents, who I love very much, in case they watch.
I was going to say, huh?
But it does bring up a lot of stuff about your inner child and figuring out kind of how to handle those things. And a lot of it that might be like unresolved or whatever it might be. So like, even if you're seeing your family over Zoom or over Skype, just really talking about the things that start to come up. And I know that there was some stuff that you can really do, like inner child work in therapy. And I know you were talking last week about, what was it called again, that method that you were talking about?
Oh, parts work.
Parts work. Yeah.
So like the quick way to explain that is just basically like we all have different parts in us, and they all have different jobs to protect us, right, and to keep us safe, and so mentally safe. But the big one that ends up coming up a lot for a lot of people is, the child, like the inner child work, and a lot of old stuff that we bury and we keep carrying around, and often gets triggered by family or similar dynamics, or just situations that feel familiar to like an unhealthy pattern of behavior. And so a lot of times, like, the holidays can really ramp that up for a lot of people, and they find themselves falling into like old patterns of behavior, like even acting like a teenager, or acting, having those kinds of things come up, because it's, every family has a dynamic and most of them are not healthy. So we fall into old patterns of behavior because that's what we know, and that's how we understand how to navigate.
That's how we stayed safe too, as kids, and you brought something up when we were talking last week already, with this inner child work, how it can feel so scary to kind of access that, especially if you've been really traumatized as a kid, or like for me, that's when my really severe OCD and anxiety took over, and I was hospitalized and all this stuff. And that for me is still a really scary thing to think about, because I'm still seeing it through the eyes of 5-year-old me or 10-year-old me, and how terrifying that is to a kid. And I really liked what you brought up when we were chatting about this week's topic, about giving that scary moment or situation to your adult self. And I really liked the way that you put that while we were chatting.
Yeah, so the idea of that is like, right, so I'll just use you as an example since you explained it already. So let's say you're triggered by something, right? And like it's bringing up feelings that are 5-year-old you, right? Or patterns of behavior that like are not healthy, but like you're used to them and they're familiar, and it's kind of like autopilot, right? Like we all have those, like, and even when we like are, and it happens just going into situations that kind of trigger those patterns. So even when you come out of it later, you can look back and be like, that was not,
Why did I do that?
like, I don't, like what happened.
Yeah.
But it is kind of like autopilot, because it's years and years and years of how you learn to navigate, your family and stuff.
Right.
So for you, if you are finding 5-year-old you is coming up, right? And like, you're able to say like to, 32, 31, I don't know how old you are, whatever. 30-year-old Kate is like, this isn't a now issue. This is some old stuff. And you can recognize it. Something that, we can do for ourselves is to recognize that it's the inner child, and it's the 5-year-old
Right.
in us, right? And to be able to like, kind of like visualize your little self like inside of you, and to say to yourself as to say to yourself as adult you to little you,
Right.
I know this is really scary, and I know that, we're going through this right now, and I know you don't really know how to handle this, so it is overwhelming, but I know how to handle it now.
Right.
And I am a grown-up, and I will take care of it. So,
Right.
And kind of to tell yourself in your mind, to tell little you, like, it's okay, I got it, I will take care of us. You can not like sit down, but like you can go and
you're okay. You're gonna
let go of this, and I will take care of this for us. And give little you permission to not try to do whatever it is that's coming up.
Right. Because adult me has all of these tools now. I'm just going to turn on the light because now I look like nobody. An adult me has all these tools and tips and tricks to really, look, specifically when we're talking about like my anxiety. Now I know how to handle it. 5-year-old me was like, what is this?
Right.
And, 10-year-old me and even 15-year-old me, I now have all of these tools that I can handle this now.
Yeah.
Putting, kind of putting that away.
Yeah. And so like, you're recognizing the difficulty for yourself, and you're validating it for yourself, and you're honoring your experience, which is extremely important also, in order to go through the process of healing, or, stopping intergenerational behavior and stuff like that, is to recognize what it is,
right?
And give it a name and give it a label. It doesn't have to be anything like specific, but just to give it a title so that you can then deal with it later, however you feel is best.
Right. And then the intergenerational, not just trauma, but also like these intergenerational habits. It is very interesting to be the one to become aware that that's an intergenerational habit. And this is something that I talk to students about a lot too, with breaking these I don't want to call them habits. We call them samskaras in yoga, these like grooves in a record, basically. That
patterns.
Yeah, the more you play it, the deeper the groove gets. And to pick that needle up and move it to a different spot on the record is really a tough thing to do. Especially if your family is, they're like, what the hell are you doing? This is how we do things, and that's something a lot of students experience, that they're like, this is really tough. But what's the alternative? It is really tough to be the one to be like, well, I'm not gonna, whatever, I'm not gonna be the one drinking, or I'm not gonna be the one to prepare, whatever it might be. To be able to recognize that and to start to even break that habit, because like you said, recognizing is that first step, and then you can go on to
and recognizing it comes with a lot of different things, drinking is a good one, because a lot of people have alcoholism in their families, because it's a lot of it isn't even recognized as alcoholism. It's just like having fun, you know what I mean? Especially on the holidays, it's like, if you remove yourself, you look at it and you're like, this is a problem. But but that one, that's breaking that cycle can be very difficult, because even just saying like, no, I'm good, like people are like, what, you're not drinking, it's like, so that can be uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, as a sober person, I can definitely tell you that that's not just with family, because my family knows that I don't drink, so they don't pressure me or anything like that, which is wonderful, and they totally understand that. But even just in regular social situations where you get pressured to it, so I can see how if you have a family that this is what they usually do, how hard it is to be the one.
Well, and then also, like, with them pressuring other people, pressuring you, that really is just telling you that they're not comfortable with their drinking, because they can't say,
Absolutely.
okay, that's fine. Like, you don't want to drink. It's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that's their discomfort with looking at their own behavior. So for you to even be able to say like, no, I'm good, like that is a big thing, because a lot of people don't even want to look at their own drinking.
Oh
Just
yeah.
drinking is just an example, but even like,
People look at their shit.
well, yeah,
it's hard. It's hard.
yeah, and so like to stop to really start to like to put the brakes on the intergenerational patterns of behavior,
Mm-hmm.
it requires you to like look at your family, right? And a lot of times for us, it's really uncomfortable to look at our parents, right? We love them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's difficult and even for our parents to look at their parents, like,
Oh yeah.
you'd have to like go like that. So like in
Yeah.
order for you to really break a cycle, it requires recognizing the hurt and the pain and the difficulty that your parents unintentionally, right, put on
Mm-hmm.
you, because it was unintentionally put on them. So a lot of
Right.
times it's just replaying what we know,
Right.
and prior
Right.
to our generation, nobody got therapy because it meant you were weak. So
Yes.
really our
That
like,
was going to be my next. That I was like that's.
yeah, but like prior to us, nobody did it. So nobody worked on themselves and nobody fixed their trauma before they had kids.
Right.
And just unintentionally and not maliciously, it just happened to continue. And
Right.
so a lot of people our age are like the first, like our generation, this like, what are we, Gen X, I think, or whatever, like
Millennials, I guess.
old millennials, right? Like
Yeah.
the old
Old
millennials.
millennials.
We are the elder millennials. That was that comedian did that one. But like, you know, we're the first ones to really be like, I'm stopping this. Like,
Yes.
no harm, no foul at this point. I mean, really, because you didn't do it on purpose, but like, I'm going to stop it now because I don't
Right.
want to continue this. I want to recognize what it is and I want to stop it because
Well,
it's not the healthiest.
and it's really interesting too. Chico's trying to shove himself through the door.
Oh, he got in.
Too, that once you start to do this work, this inner child work, it does spread.
Mm-hmm.
It spreads to other people because my my parents have started to look at their families too, and their relationship with their parents, and all of this stuff that was unhealthy, and they're also starting to realize it. So I feel like when you start to do this work, yeah, it's really tough and really isolating first.
Mm-hmm.
But once you really start to talk about it, other people are like,
It normalizes it.
maybe I should start to look at that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it normalizes that, like, it's okay to like say to yourself, like, I love my parents, they did the best that they could with what they had at the time, but I would like to make a conscious effort to do better for my children. And that's not saying they did anything wrong or like they, whatever, but when you start kind of expressing that to them, then it gives them permission to then do it to their parents, because they're seeing their children aren't hating them for whatever pattern of behavior they continued. So you're almost kind of like giving your parents permission to let go of stuff from their parents too. So it's like a backwards intergenerational healing too.
Yes. Yeah, that's something that we talk about a lot too in yoga and healing, is this kind of backwards, like anytime that you're addressing anything, healing back generations of trauma. And yeah, like you said, giving people permission. And also when you start to do this work and see your parents as people, right? Like I've started to, that there's like that magical age that you hit where you're like, oh my God, my parents are people. You start to
I think it's like sometime in college.
Sometime in my early 20s, I think it must have been, that I was like, oh shit. they,
realize they're flawed, and you realize they're just like you, and they make mistakes, and they're not
yeah,
perfect, and
yeah,
they come down off of that pedestal that you've had them on for your entire life, and then they become normal human beings.
right. And then you start to even develop a better relationship with them because you start to recognize like, hey, you did the best that you could. And um, yeah, it just really, that acknowledgement was like a huge deal to me, that I was like, oh my God,
Mhm.
they're not superhumans. They're not.
No. And, the other thing I noticed too for, like, you know, a lot of times with our parents or, like, their parents, like, they never got the opportunity to really process their feelings about that stuff with their parents
Mhm.
because you just didn't talk about it with your parents.
Right.
And again, like, we're the first, like, group of people who are normalizing that and sitting down with our parents and saying, like, "This was kind of fucked up,
Yeah.
but I forgive you for it, and it's
Right.
okay," and, like, so, like, we're getting this kind of cathartic healing with our parents and them with us that they don't usually get before they lose their parents.
Right. And I was talking to my mother-in-law about this actually, that, anytime something happens with your kid that they mess up, you feel this massive amount of guilt.
Right.
And we were talking about that the other night, and I recognized too that the more that we address that, the better they feel too. Like, we acknowledge, we know you did the best that you could. We know that you were a flawed human being. And then they can kind of let go of this guilt from themselves too. Does that make sense? Like that
Yeah.
kind of,
Yeah.
their guilt gets lifted too, that they know that we understand that they were doing the best that they could with
Yeah, and, like, no one is holding them responsible for the actions of their adult children, like, at this
right,
point, you know what I
right.
mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Like her oldest child is 32. Like you, at this point,
right,
you
like,
have
we're
choices.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that's enough for today. That's a lot of work that we have to do over the holidays. So yeah, that's it's definitely a good topic, and I'm sure that there will be more that we want to talk about with that. Maybe we'll expand it into next week a little bit too. So thank you for joining us as always.
No problem,
In the
anytime.
yellow chair, Heather in the yellow chair. Um, yeah, we'll see you guys next week.